about what kids go through.
Being able to read words is important, but it doesn't lead automatically to comprehending text. Next, you'll see students reading texts that are appropriate for their grade levels. Some of the students are native speakers of English, others are not. The difficulties they encounter as they read show how challenging reading text can be.
Okay, what was this page about? Do you remember?
About a thing that gets thick, and the thicker it goes, the faster it goes. The thicker, that it's faster and it's heavier on land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it.
That's it? And what's the it that you're talking about?
The thicker.
I mean, part of what we tried to do here was we tried to get kids who could read the words, and it's clear that they could read the words. They read the words, but they didn't understand the text. The challenge is in putting the words together. So these are kids who've gotten far beyond, in English, they've gotten far beyond where we are in Arabic, right? But that doesn't mean that the problems are solved, and that's sort of the point here. And in fact, if you look at the text, it's not such a crazy guess if you don't know what thicker means, right? The thicker. It starts out the thicker. So it's not crazy, but on the other hand, it does represent lack of understanding of the word thicker and lack of familiarity with this particular syntactic structure. Not something I would have predicted a fourth grader, even a second language speaker, would have trouble with.
One thing that I've noticed, and especially in science, the word glacier in Spanish and English are cognates, 100%. Yet a child will not make that transference in cognates. And why the confusion if it is a 100% cognate?
Well, this is a very cogent observation that glacier is a cognate. Many of these words that you encounter in science texts or in more complex texts are cognates, and yet children don't automatically make those connections. We presume they're using background knowledge from Spanish. In fact, they might not know these words in Spanish, and very often the words that one would learn in Spanish by having learned to read in Spanish and having engaged in lots of reading in Spanish are precisely the words that they don't know in Spanish either. So what we might presuppose about transfer isn't always available. But even if children are very good speakers of Spanish with very large vocabularies, they do need help to have it pointed out to them that they need to make this, that they could use the information. And in fact, the real intervention efforts to instruct children about the value of cross-language transfer have been demonstrated to be important.
Which also suggests that in situations where you can teach bilingually, that the same kind of support is needed in native language reading, and we cannot assume that children who speak a language natively necessarily have all the knowledge that is necessary to interpret texts.
Now, they said that the Earth was like a perfectly boiled egg. Can you explain how the Earth is like a perfectly boiled egg?
Like the inside is the core.
Okay.
And the outside is just like dirt and everything. and they have all, if you dig, there's rocks underneath it.
Mm-hmm. And how is that like a perfectly boiled egg?
Sure.
Too weird an image? Yeah, a lot of people just read that and go, what? Okay, so you mentioned the core, and did you learn what the core of the Earth is made of? Yolk?
The crust of the earth is just like the shell of the egg, thin and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the mantle in the earth is just like, I don't know what that white stuff is called in between it.
Okay, the white stuff.
Yeah, the white stuff would probably is getting closer to the core. You'd be getting closer to the core.
Mm-hmm.
And right in the middle of the core would be the yolk in the egg, which would be the exact center, which is the base of all of it.
So here we have a text which uses a metaphor, and the earth is like an egg, to help children understand. Emily was working hard, and yet I don't get the sense that Emily was helped at all by the metaphor, right? I mean, she sort of has this sense of the layers, but whether this egg metaphor helped her is quite unclear. I take it that the author's goal here was to invoke an egg in which the white is hard and the yolk is liquid. And that key issue that the core of the earth is molten metal and liquid was something that even Joe didn't actually express, right? He didn't actually get that. So you're absolutely right. It wasn't. It was a very remote set of relationships to invoke. So Patricius, when asked what's at the center of the earth, she said the yolk. And as we see, the text invoked that kind of mistake, and it's a yolk or core. And we don't know whether she's never encountered the word yolk before and thus doesn't know that it actually refers to egg and not to earth, or whether she was actually doing a good job of utilizing the metaphor. And these are the kinds of observations that, I mean, it's a tiny little piece of text here, right? It's a couple of questions from each of these children, and yet it's a little bit of a window onto how hard these texts are that in ways that we might not have foreseen.
It was about a mourning cloak caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
It was about what the mourning cloak caterpillar eats, what it looks like, and where you could find it.
Why do you think this caterpillar is called a mourning cloak caterpillar?
Because it wakes up in the morning. Because the color of their skin is like the color of one of those old-fashioned funeral clothes that women wore.
And finally, do you know what mourning means?
Well, I know the definition of the homophone to it, but not really.
But not this morning. Okay. Could you guess?
It's a type of cloth.
Gina says, do you know what mourning means? And she says, well, I know the definition of the homophone to it. So she's given this very good definition of description of why it's called the mourning cloak caterpillar. which if you look at the text, is straight out of the text. It uses words like funeral, is not able to connect this to the word mourning, and then recognizes it's not a word she knows, and Gina says, well, make a guess. She says, I think it's a kind of cloth. Okay? So, strong inferencing, not a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of stuff that kids like this have to have been taught in order to understand these texts, and there's no way we can expect them to pick it up just from kind of vague exposure.